I'm very excited to introduce our speaker for tonight, Dr. Nicole OQuinn, who is an assistant professor of pediatrics at the Emory University School of Medicine, and she's a board-certified behavior analyst on the doctoral level and a faculty member for the Language and Learning Program at Marcus Autism Center. Dr. OQuinn completed her doctorate in educational psychology with a specialization in applied behavior analysis from Baylor University. So I want to welcome Dr. OQuinn tonight for sharing her expertise, and I will turn it over to her and she can tell you a little bit more about herself and what the program we're going to be having tonight will entail. Thank you all.
Great. Thank you so much for that great introduction. I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, does that look good for everyone? Perfect. Great. Well, as I was introduced, my name is Nicole. I'm really excited to be here today to give this presentation. As I said, I currently work at Marcus Autism Center as a faculty member within the Language and Learning Clinic. I've worked with autistic individuals for about 9 years in total, but specifically worked in the field of ABA for about 7 of those years. So really excited to continue on in this field. So during our time together today, I have a few goals for us. So the first being that we all understand the components of an IEP, with it being back to school season. It's likely that this is something you're probably going to have to encounter and be proficient with. I also want to maybe provide some tips to help manage IEPs effectively as a caregiver. Also give some tips about effectively communicating with your students, teacher, and school staff, as well as help you identify some strategies that could help your student prepare for the start of the school year. So with all that being said, we'll just jump right in. So an IEP is a legally mandated document that outlines the services and supports a student will receive. This includes specific goals that the child should reach within a year. These documents serve individuals from pre-K to 12th grade or ages 3 to 21. These documents are part of the public education system, meaning that private schools don't offer IEPs. For private school students who need those supports, there are other arrangements such as service plans that your school might offer. If you'd like more information on how your child's private school could support their education in a similar way, feel free to reach out to me. I'll give my contact information at the end, and I'm happy to provide you with some resources to help you on that front. So how does a child qualify to receive an IEP? It should be noted that not every child who struggles in school receives an IEP. To qualify, a child's school must perform, they must determine that the child's performance is adversely affected by a disability that falls within 13 different categories. So I have kind of a quick snapshot of what those categories look like here. So you can think of your child's IEP as kind of a blueprint for their educational experience at school. So there is some variation in exactly what IEPs look like across districts and across different school systems, but all of them have some really pretty major components in common. The first being student information section. This includes all the relevant information about an individual, including their name, age, date of birth, grade, and very importantly, all members of the IEP team. There's also typically a section that talks about the student's present level of educational performance. It describes the child's current abilities, skills, challenges, and strengths. Typically, these sections also describe some amount of social skills and behavior to help gain an accurate snapshot of what the child's current progress and status really looks like. Annual goals should consist of academic and functional skills that the child can reasonably accomplish during the school year. Each of these goals should be broken down into shorter term objectives to be met throughout the year. The IEP team must also include how they will keep track of your child's progress towards these annual goals. The document will also detail the service provisions, which includes what special education services the child will get and for how long, any services outside of the school year like summer services, as well as any transition planning for the child to get ready for a life after high school. The IEP will also specify what accommodation the child will get at school. So things like a seat at the front of the classroom. It also details any modifications, which are changes, of course, to what's expected of the child, like, for example, maybe getting less homework. This section also includes information about any assistive technology the child might need. The participation section explains how and to what extent the child will be included in general education classes and other activities, including state tests. And then all IEPs have a signature line where the parent or guardian officially agrees to the plan. Keep in mind that an IEP isn't always all or nothing. Families can attach addendums to identify and state that they're only agreeing to certain parts of an IEP. For the parts of the document for which the caregiver may disagree, they can discuss their concerns directly with the IEP team and attempt to work out an agreement. If an agreement is not able to be reached, caregivers can always request mediation through the school. An additional resource is that caregivers can file a complaint with the state education agency, and through that can request due process hearing, at which mediation would definitely be made available. So now that we have this snapshot of what an IEP is and what kind of components are contained within that IEP, let's talk about some strategies to effectively manage your child's IEP as a caregiver. So management of your child's IEP is incredibly important. This is how you're going to ensure that all of the components of that document are being upheld and that your child is getting access to the services that they need. So of course, the first step in effectively managing that IEP is making sure that you have the most recent version of the document with all of the signatures from the necessary parties. Remember, this is a legally binding document that all parties who have signed have agreed to uphold. This document is what you're going to return to as both a reference point and what you're going to use as evidence to support your claims of your child's necessary access to the services that have been outlined within that document. If at any point you feel your child's school is not providing anything that was outlined in that document, remember, this is what you're going to return to. Another thing to do is to make sure that you're checking in with your child's primary teacher very frequently. Your child may or may not be able to communicate with you accurately about what their IEP services and goals look like at school. In a couple of slides, we're going to talk about some ways to effectively communicate with your child's primary teacher. So I will prime you for that. So keeping the aspect of checking in frequently is definitely something we don't want to forget about. Another key is knowing the names and roles of every special educator and service provider assigned to your child. Make sure you know which services each individual provides, what days they provide that service, and how long that service lasts. Thoroughly go over your child's progress reports when you get them. Each goal listed should be measurable and thus should be being reported to you in that measurement. You might have to read between the lines sometimes to determine your child's actual progress or lack thereof. That's why measurable goals are so important. If you're able, be sure to talk with your child and pay really close attention to what they may or may not be saying about their time at school to help you really determine if progress is adequately being made. Another thing to keep in mind is to be proactive. Be sure to contact the IEP team leader if you feel that the IEP isn't being followed in the way that you agreed to it. If this situation doesn't improve after making contact, you can request a special IEP meeting with all assigned special educators. And it is really important to remember that you do not have to wait until the next yearly meeting to address any problems. You can call this meeting as soon as you start having concerns. So this is a really good opportunity and segue to promote our care coordination services here at Marcus. They were not able to be with us tonight, but they wanted me to share all of the information in terms of how to contact them. That way you had this resource in your back pocket as well. So this care coordination team are a group of licensed social workers who specialize in identifying and connecting families with any additional supports that might be available to them. If you have questions or if you want to learn more about how they could support your family potentially, their contact information is of course on this slide. I'll be sure to present this again at the end of the presentation, along with some additional events and announcements that this team wanted me to share with you all since they cannot be here today. So like I said previously, I want to revisit and talk about the best strategies for communicating with your child's school care team, because this will be a critical component to making sure that you are able to determine if your child's getting the skills and the procedures that have been outlined for them, as well as to make sure that they are being effectively followed. So the first time you meet your child's teacher, really try to create a positive start to that relationship while still being pretty clear that you'd like to form an effective partnership to ensure your child succeeds. So for example, it's so nice to meet you. I'm really looking forward to working with you this year to help Billy succeed. So you're excited to see the teacher, but you're also making it clear that you are very focused on your child's outcomes, right? Or another example, I've heard great things about your classroom from other parents, and I'm really excited for us to get to work together now. You want to establish yourself as a positive person initially with the teacher as much as possible. And that's, of course, going to increase the likelihood that they're going to be more receptive to your communications. Once you find the best method of communication, make sure you stick with it. Teachers are very busy, overworked people. Working with your child's teacher to identify their preferred method of communication is really going to increase your likelihood of success once again. By following their preferences for communication, you're more likely to have successful exchanges. Some things that you could suggest or kind of investigate with your child's teachers as their preferences are things like emails, daily logs that's at home, written notes, phone calls, one-on-one meetings, whatever it is, just make sure that you figure out what it is and you do it consistently. So another tip is that before meeting, calling, writing an email, think about your specific needs, concerns, or questions that you have for the teacher. This will ensure that you are able to use your time to communicate with the teacher most efficiently. Some common areas that you might consider checking in on, or maybe some of the subjects that your child's doing really well at the moment, how their interactions with classmates are looking, what kind of tasks you could be working on at home. Additionally, be sure that you're always keeping the teacher well informed of any major updates or changes within the home that might affect any behavior or performance at school. So of course, no one knows your child better than you do, but your child does get to, or your child's teacher does get to see your child in a unique way. So if your child's teacher has ideas or has had success with something within the classroom, be open to incorporating those things within the home as well. If the teacher reports problems, work with the teacher to troubleshoot what could be triggering the issues with your child, as well as share what might have worked for you in the past. Finally, presenting a united front to your child is going to make a big difference in consistency. Your child should definitely know that you have these regular communications with their teacher. They should know that you and the teacher are working together and really understand that you guys are a team. With the two parties working close together to provide those consistent expectations, your child's going to continue to have opportunities to grow and succeed at school as well as at home. Now for a little bit more of a fun part, some ideas to get your child prepared for and maybe even excited for the upcoming school year. So one of the lowest effort methods for prepping your child to return to school is to talk to them. Remember, children are experts at picking up our cues and modifying their behavior based on your attitudes towards a subject. So try not to unintentionally create any negative biases for your child to have prior to starting the first day. Try to keep a positive outlook as you discuss school with your child. But by talking with your child often about the upcoming school year, you'll be able to really help them anticipate this upcoming change in routine, which hopefully will, in due course, decrease the child's associated anxiety with that change in routine. While you're talking about these things, make sure to be really specific too about what school's going to look like. Maybe talk to your child about their teacher if you know who your teacher is going to be ahead of time. Talk about different friends that they might have in their class if you're lucky enough to know who's going to be in their class ahead of time, as well as talking about what your new daily schedule will look like. How's their morning routine going to change? How's their night routine going to be modified? Talking about all of these things is really helping your child know that this change is coming, get more familiar with it, and in turn feel a lot more comfortable with it. Additionally, adding some visual supports into your child's environment can go a long way with helping them anticipate the shift to school and the upcoming changes in their schedule. As you get closer to the school year, consider incorporating some kind of calendar visual to help your child conceptualize how much time is left before school starts. So one idea is to put a calendar out in a frequently trafficked area of your home. Each night, you and your child can cross off each day leading up to the first day of school. A quick note about this, doing this with your child versus for your child is a really important component of all of these visual supports I'm going to talk about. By having your child do it with you or do it themselves, you're making sure that they are, of course, included, but also that they're paying attention to this great support that you have created for them. Similarly to marking days off the calendar, you can also create or find online more traditional countdown formats that your child could fill in each day or write on to help them visualize the countdown and the upcoming. Another really helpful visual support that can be modified to assist with almost any routine is a visual schedule. So I will be diving deeper into visual schedules before the end of this presentation, with the hope that everyone here will be comfortable-ish enough to implement their own at the end of this. Of course, that's, a basic visual schedule, but hopefully you'll have a good understanding of the framework to be able to start trying it out. So as much as you're able to, help make that school environment feel familiar to your child prior to the first day of school. So a lot of schools will let you bring your child during the summer, really with the hope that you're able to achieve this goal of increasing that familiarity. So if you're able to access the school, once you're in the school, make sure to stop and allow your child to really investigate and spend time in all of the spaces that they will probably be spending a lot of time in during their day too. So they'll probably be in their classroom most of the day, right? Spending some time in the lunchroom, playing in the gym, heading out to the playground, etc. In addition, if you're one of those people that are lucky enough to know who your child's new classmates are going to be, consider scheduling a play date with some of them. So that's just another person and another familiar aspect of your child's first day at school. Finally, what I personally think will have the biggest impact on the ease of your child's transition back to school is how much you're able to practice this new routine. So when practicing this routine, try to incorporate as much of it as you can to be as realistic as possible. So this could be as small as incorporating the new bedtime and wake times that your child is going to have to experience maybe a couple weeks before school starts, so their sleep schedule has shifted over, to practicing going through the whole morning routine on the time deadline, and then ending it with driving to the school at the same time you would typically be dropping them off. So this is a point where I am really excited to talk a little bit more about how you could potentially make a visual schedule for your child in the home. So whenever you're modifying any kind of routine, starting a new routine, or even trying to help your child complete some kind of non-preferred activity, I highly, highly suggest incorporating a visual schedule where possible. And like I said earlier, the caveat is that what I'm going to tell you is a pretty easy form of a visual schedule. It could be that you implement a visual schedule with your child and they need additional supports to be successful, in which I highly recommend reaching out to school staff, as well as maybe care coordination, or if you have any other kind of behavior analytic provider in your child's life, they can also help you modify this to meet their needs if the most basic format isn't maybe the best fit for your child. So a visual schedule, in its essence, is an aid that uses a series of pictures to communicate a series of activities or specific steps to an activity. By using a visual schedule, you can really help your child understand daily events, anticipate changes, as well as provide a clear signal of when an event will end. This is really helpful for those things that you're trying to get them to do that might not be as highly preferred. So all visual schedules include some kind of component that allows your child to signify that a step or an activity has been completed. This could be as simple as writing a check mark next to the step. You could provide a space for your child to move an icon from a to-do column to an all done column, or some other unique way like moving tabs off to reveal or cover up something that's already been completed. One of the great things about visual schedules, like I said earlier, is they really can be incorporated to almost any routine. So you can help them with the morning routine, you can help it with the new night routine, specific things related to bath time, teeth brushing, etc. They're really pretty versatile tools that we have to use. Another great thing about visual schedules is they are really effective across a lot of different profiles of learners and can be adapted to suit almost any learner depending on their skill level. Additionally, they can be higher or lower tech depending on your preference and your child. But the ability to modify these schedules with ease, especially as your learner changes and grows and develops new skills, is definitely another big pro for this type of intervention. So I wanted to talk you guys a little bit through how to make a visual schedule and then briefly how you can implement a visual schedule within the home. So the first step in creating that visual schedule is going to be, of course, identifying the routine you want to use it with. So for our example, I will use a general morning routine. to kind of create alongside of you guys. So once you've identified which routine that you want to make this schedule for, you want to move through the schedule, or sorry, move through the routine yourself and make sure that you're making a note of each step that you've completed. And of course, be detailed with the steps so you don't leave anything out. I will say it's probably pretty likely that you could pull these steps of the routine from your memory and write them down on a piece of paper. I always find it more helpful to actually complete and act out the routines to really make sure I'm not unintentionally omitting anything that I do actually need my learner to complete. Remember, including each and every step we want our learners to complete within this specific schedule is what's going to help them be the most successful and increase their independence while using that schedule. Also note that if the sequence of the steps is important to their completion, make sure that you're putting them in that appropriate order as well. So the next step is to gather all of the materials that you're going to need. So I suggest starting with a lower tech option. So that's what I'll describe here. For this, you will need to create some kind of visual icon for each step that you listed out in our previous step. So you can see some examples over here on the left part of the screen. A lot of these icons can be found through a really simple Google search. Like my go-to is typing in action, clip art. So brushing teeth, clip art. Getting dressed, clip art. Super easy, works perfectly. The other thing you're going to need is some kind of background. So I suggest using either cardstock or paper that's laminated. If you have a more gentle learner, then you might not have to be as concerned with the strength of the background material. But I always suggest using something that has a little bit more strength and resistance to it, so the schedule can have a little bit more longevity of life. Once you have that background page, you want to create potentially these two columns similar to that image in the middle, to do, and then all done. On that background page, you're going to want to attach some Velcro, magnets, whatever you decide to use to attach the icons to the surface. That way, the icons have a place to live and a place where they can be placed and stick and stay once you move them to the all done pile. So once you have your finished product, it's going to look like something similar to what we have on the right side of the screen. So for our example, here is our visual schedule as we have created it with those steps that I outlined. Whenever you're using and introducing your newly created visual schedule, I do want to really remind you that we want to start by teaching our children how to use them. Your child might be able to pick up on it just through explanation or modeling, but it's going to be the most effective if you are actively going through it with them the first couple times and make sure you're rewarding them for engaging in these different activities and going through these different steps. So with that in mind, especially before you bring out the schedule, you want to make sure you have a way to provide praise or identify to your child that they've done something really well as they work through each step of the schedule. So for some learners, this might be a high five, great job, give a little bit of tickles, maybe a little dance party, and they're good to go. For other learners, it might look a little bit more like a small Skittle, a piece of another type of candy, or some other maybe token to get a treat at the end of your schedule. This is something that I'm sure you're all immediately thinking of for your own learner. So when it's time to start using the schedule, you want to present the schedule, but make sure that you keep it within view of your learner so they can always reference back to it, but also keep it within reach so it's easy for them to manipulate the schedule as they need to. Once you present that schedule and you put it out, you want to immediately start helping your child through that first item on the schedule. So for our schedule, this would be waking up, getting out of bed in the morning. So as soon as your child finishes that step, you want to immediately prompt them to move the icon to the all done section and then you want to give them that reinforcer, or however you identify would be the best way to show your child that they've just done a really great job. So now that you've gone through that first step, your schedule should ideally look kind of like this. Like I said before, as your child moves that icon, they finish, give them a reward. We want to give rewards at each step initially, and then you can kind of gauge if your child's doing it really independently. You could potentially wait to the end to give them a reward, but I always say start with more rewards that you can fade out later. So once your child's gotten their reward, they're happy, they're feeling complete, you can move on to the next step in the schedule, and you just repeat that sequence. You help them go through that activity, you move it over, and you give them that reward, whatever that reward looks like for your child. A key thing to these schedules, though, is making sure that you're always moving and reinforcing in real time. It's not as helpful to go all the way through the schedule and then pull it back out and have your child just quickly move them all. It's going to be the most effective if your child is actively moving each icon and getting a reward for engaging that behavior right after they complete it. So it should be one at a time, do something. Move another one, do something else. Move the next icon, get your reward. So then, like I said, you complete the remaining activities just like you did the first one, with that reinforcer after each activity is very, very, very important. And each time you practice this schedule, your child is hopefully going to slowly become more and more independent with using this schedule, as well as more fluent. They'll be able to move through it a little bit quicker. They'll know exactly what you're asking them to do. So before we wrap up, I do have some of those resources that are from our care coordination team that they wanted to make sure that you had access to. So I have some information about some upcoming events that you guys might be interested potentially in participating with. Each of these events, there's only 2 of them. There is an associated flyer. Feel free to email me to ask for either flyer, and I will be more than happy to send it your way. So this event is the Back to School Bash, which is hosted by Families First. At this event, they're going to be giving away a ton of items. They'll also be providing some additional resources, and it looks like it's going to be a fun carnival type time. So definitely something to check out. Additionally, we have this company, Telic Empowerment. They are a community organization that offers parent empowerment groups monthly. And this is a wonderful way to connect with other caregivers and to gather helpful information. The topic for their upcoming parent empowerment group on August 19th is IEPs and parental rights. So that might be something really good to check out before the start of the school year. And they also offer free events for families throughout the year. If you're interested, definitely visit their website to sign up for alerts. You can also reach out to me to ask for that flyer. And that's all that I had for you guys. So happy to answer any questions that y'all might have.
Thank you, Dr. OGuinn. The Atlanta Autism Consortium is thrilled you were able to present tonight for these families, and we'll be sure to make this accessible for anybody interested in the future. I'm looking at the chat and I don't see any questions just yet. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, Jamel has his hand raised. Jamel, we're unable to unmute you since it's a webinar, but could you put it into the chat? So good to see you here tonight. Tanisha has a great question. She says, how do you begin the IEP process? Can you walk us through that?
Yes, so I can maybe provide a little bit of a brief overview. It's funny you asked that because I had that within the presentation and then I took it out. But You have to first initiate the process by getting a referral by your school or contacting your school yourself and asking for a referral for an assessment for an IEP. If you're interested in the more nitty-gritty details, please email me and I can send you some specific resources that outline it really clearly. They'll probably be a lot more useful than me just kind of talking through it quickly. But definitely want you to have those resources because it's definitely something accessible if you're interested in your child having access to that.
Great. It looks like Tanisha said she will be reaching out to you. There's so much to know about IEPs. And so I think that's going to be a really good conversation to continue. I think a lot of people have leveraged IEPs to get resources such as therapies as well. And so any tips and tricks that you can share with that would be helpful, I'm sure, as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that IEP is really that document that's going to get you what you need. So whenever you are building that IEP with your child's IEP team, definitely, be relentless. Don't stop asking for more until you are happy with it.
Great. And then Michael says, what is the best age to start including your child in the IEP process? And how do you ensure they are listened to during the process? That's such a great question, especially as you think about that transition and getting adolescents and youth more involved. Any thoughts on?
Absolutely. I think that's such a good question. And, I don't know that I have a really great answer because it could really depends so much on your specific child and how much are they really able to comprehend during that process. I don't think it's ever too early to start bringing your child to those meetings if they are showing some interest. You think that they have the attention span to sit through that meeting and potentially start learning at an early age. But in terms of making sure that they're listened to, you really are their best advocate as their parent. So as long as you are able to really support them in their requests, give voice to those requests, if maybe their voice is a little bit more quiet, hopefully through that, they will be able to be respected throughout that process.
And then just to clarify, our IEP meetings, are they done usually within the school times or are they done after school times? Just thinking about parents that are working and how we can best help them to navigate that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that it depends on the school. I would expect it to be during school time, but I think that's definitely something you'd want to reach out to your child's school to find out how flexible they can be with those times.
And then, yes, we have another comment in the chat that talks about the services that are seemingly lacking here in Georgia. So thinking about that, having changed a diagnosis from autism to developmental delays, how do you insist on previous state IEPs? So that's a really great question. If you come from out of Georgia, and let's say they were coming from Tennessee or some other state, and they had things built into their IEPs, but it sounds like in Georgia, they are maybe not wanting to honor those. So is that, how would you have that the previous state's IEP followed through in Georgia?
Yeah, so something that you can do is if you're not happy with the assessment that your child's school provided, if you think that it wasn't accurate for whatever reason, you can push and advocate to get either another assessment done or have an outside third-party person complete that assessment. That's another thing that if you want to shoot me an email, I can probably dig up some resources that could maybe be helpful to your specific position. But I think that if you have the previous state's IEP, that could be really good evidence maybe that the assessment that they did here wasn't adequate for what your child needed. So I think that it's really great that you have that. I think that it's definitely worth some investigating though to see what exactly you can do to maybe get a more accurate assessment for your kiddo.
That's really great. Thank you. And then Tanisha has a great question also, is there a huge difference between the IEP and the 504 plan? So is that something that, are you able to shed some light on that? I know these questions are so important.
Yeah, I can shed a little bit of light. I will admit I haven't reflected on a 504 plan. It has been a minute since I had a learner who had a 504 plan that was not incorporated within the IEP. Typically, the 504 plan is going to be a lot less intensive than the IEP. I believe the 504 plan as well. The way that it is implemented too, and the way that it is executed differs a little bit. I definitely don't want to speak too much and give you incorrect information. There's definitely a difference though. I would say that if you were given a 504 plan instead of an IEP, I would definitely investigate why exactly the 504 plan was decided on instead of the IEP, especially if you're expecting an IEP. It tends to be like a lower intensity and provides different kinds of supports than an IEP would. I don't know, Susan, if you can speak a little bit to the difference between the two.
I'm not as familiar. And so that's why it's a really great question between the difference. It seems like it comes down to some legality of it. And I think those are really important avenues to explore of which one's the right one for their child. And especially if they're not getting services currently. And one of these would be more instrumental in ensuring that they're getting those services.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Any other questions? Seems like, I know on, looking at that at first glance, Tanisha, it looks like they both are helping to ensure that children are getting the services that they are owed under law through the school system. And I know, Dr. Gwen, if they reach out to you, I'm sure, as we all do, if we are not the best person to answer that question, I'm sure that you'll help redirect them.
Yes, absolutely. Like any questions that you have, feel free to email me with a list. The care coordination, the team that I mentioned before, they are a phenomenal resource. They know so much about the ins and outs of the school system. They can also connect you with different advocates to help you make sure that you're getting what your child needs in a way that maybe their BCBA could not in the same way. So yeah, if that's something you're interested in, definitely reach out and I can connect you with them.
And then another great question in the chat, just looking at parents who choose private schooling versus public, and what are the major differences? And I'm assuming you mean in terms of IEPs being implemented in that, but I know often parents that are able to afford private schooling, which can be pretty expensive, they do say there are smaller classroom sizes, and so they have the benefit of some of those resources.
Yeah, for sure. A big consideration though that I always point out to my parents when they're choosing public versus private is that private is not legally obligated to give your child any services if they don't already have the infrastructure to support those children. So I always want to caution parents that if they're interested in doing private over public school, they do a lot of investigating about what that specific school can provide and what those supports that they're providing really look like in action. Because with the public school, you at least have the fallback and that they are legally obligated to give your child what they need.
Yeah, I think that's probably getting at the root of what they're asking, is that that's the public school systems are bound to that by law, whereas private school systems sounds like they don't have as many of those places where they can reinforce that. Hopefully that answers your question.
I didn't include it in my presentation, but I did pull some resources that talk a little bit about what special education services could look like in your child's private school. So if that's something you're interested in, shoot me an email. I'm happy to provide those for you as well.
It's really great. It looks like those are our questions. It looks like, Jamel, we can connect offline. Looks like you're reflecting on some of your previous experiences. So would love to hear more from you as well. Well, that concludes our July program. The AAC is so thankful for you, Dr. OGuinn, for sharing this information and for sharing your resources, such as the care coordination team. That seems like that's going to be also a really important resource going forward for people to contact with further questions, and then your email right there. So we all just want to thank you very much for your time and your expertise. And we look forward to seeing hopefully all of you in August at our next program.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.